are violent and include dismemberment of a child's fragile body, chemical poisoning, and hypodermic needles to the baby's heart. There is nothing humane, benign, or compassionate about abortion. It is violence against children, and it hurts women. But the relatively new scientific understanding that unborn children are forced to endure excruciating pain in the performance of later-term abortions, and perhaps even earlier, should shock us. Children not only die from abortion, they suffer. This is a wake-up call to all Americans. Unborn children feel pain. This highly disturbing fact should further inspire us all to seek to protect these weak and vulnerable children. Tragically, for the defenseless child in the womb, the D.C. Council voted in 2004 to eviscerate every legal protection afforded unborn children, making abortion on demand legal in D.C. right up until the moment of birth. The D.C. Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act, authored by my distinguished colleague Trent Franks, seeks to safeguard at least some of these kids from 20 weeks onward from both pain and death. Of note, today's vote comes on the heels of yesterday's federal district court decision upholding a similar law in Arizona. In that decision, the judge said by 20 weeks, sensory receptors develop all over the child's body, and when provided by painful stimuli, such as a needle, the child reacts as measured by increases in the child's stress hormones, heart rate, and blood pressure. Mr. Speaker, the poster to my left depicts a D&E abortion, the most commonly procured method of abortion in later term, a dismemberment abortion. It involves using a long steel tool to grasp and tear off by brute force the arms and the legs of the developing child, after which the skull is crushed. Testifying at the subcommittee hearing, or the full committee hearing in May, Dr. Anthony Levitano, a former abortionist who has performed many of these D&E abortions, said, "Once you have grasped something inside, squeeze on the clamp, set the jaws, and pull hard." And then he talks about how arms and legs and intestines are all pulled out. Then he said, many times a little face may come out and stare back at you. Congratulations, you have just successfully performed a second trimester abortion. This legislation seeks to protect these kids from this horrible cruelty.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Arizona reserves. Gentleman from Michigan.
Mr. Speaker, I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Arizona.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the gentlelady from Ohio, Mrs. Schmidt.
Gentlewoman from Ohio is recognized for 30 seconds.
Thank you so much. You know, I've heard a lot of debate back and forth, but my friends, this is not about ending abortion. Oh, how I wish it was. This is about ending late-term abortions in the District of Columbia because of the cruel way that those babies are terminated. The dismemberment, the pain that is caused by those little innocent babies is contrary to what the founders of our Constitution wanted for our nation. That's what this act is about. We have the right and the authority because of the Constitution to do this, to end this very barbaric procedure, and that's why we need to pass this legislation. Now yield back.
Expired. The gentleman from Arizona reserves, and the gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to yield our remaining time to the distinguished delegate from Washington, D.C., Eleanor Holmes Norton.
Gentlewoman from District of Columbia has 1.5 minutes remaining.
Mr. Speaker, almost all abortions in the District of Columbia are performed between 6 and 10 weeks. Mr. Speaker, I was denied, my request was denied even to testify on this bill, even though this bill affects only residents of my city. I was told that, and I did not insist, that the Democrats had a witness. They had to hear from that witness. Christy Zink had an abortion at 22 weeks only after her physician told her that she was carrying a fetus with half a brain and that if it were born alive, it would have constant seizures throughout its life. This bill would not have allowed Christy Zink to have an abortion, and she would have had to carry that fetus to term. She has now had a healthy baby. She still grieves for the baby she could not have, but she would never have deserved the punishment that this bill would have inflicted on her. I ask members of this House to respect the laws and the women and the residents of the District of Columbia. Let us do what you insist all over the United States be done in your districts. We differ. Respect our differences, even as I respect yours.
Gentlewoman's time has expired. She yields back. Gentleman from Arizona has a minute and a half.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I would yield myself the balance of my time.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, there was a time in this country and even across the world when protecting little babies from torture was a noble thing. Mr. Speaker, I've heard my colleagues today call this effort to protect little babies from torturous pain extremist ideology. And I would just suggest to you, sir, if they are right, then I, for one, will envy no one that they might call mainstream. Because, Mr. Speaker, this bill simply says that we intend in the seat of freedom in America, where Congress has the ultimate and clear responsibility constitutionally to legislate, that we're going to protect.
The motion is reconsidered, is laid on the table. The unfinished business is the vote on the motion of the gentleman from Utah, Mr. Chaffetz, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 828, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 828, a bill to amend Title V, United States Code, to provide that persons having seriously delinquent tax debts shall be ineligible for federal employment.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill as amended? Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote.
We're just watching the vote, right? Yep. The second of 3 votes on the House floor, this vote on H.R. 828, a bill prohibiting people with seriously delinquent taxes from federal employment. One more 5-minute vote will follow, and that'll be a vote on the bill which would ban abortions in the District of Columbia after 20 weeks of pregnancy. That's the next and final vote this evening. We expect the House to then move on to complete the remaining suspension bills and vote on those at a later time. Meanwhile, the House Rules Committee has gavelled out, temporarily recessed anyway, for this series of votes. They're considering, or have been considering, the rule for debate for a couple of pieces of legislation. One would simplify the tax code, and another deals with extending the 2001-2003 tax cuts. Those bills expected on the House floor later this week, and the Rules Committee should gavel back in for more consideration this evening. Live coverage on C-SPAN 3.
Two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The unfinished business is the vote on the motion of the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Franks, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 3803 as amended, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar number 461, H.R. 3803, a bill to amend Title 18 United States Code to protect pain-capable unborn children in the District of Columbia and for other purposes.
Question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill as amended? Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote.
Representative Trent Frank's bill has 222 co-sponsors. It's a bill that would ban abortions in the District of Columbia after 20 weeks of pregnancy. This is a 5-minute vote. David Hawkins of Congressional Quarterly wrote that on the other key abortion rights vote of the year, also with a two-thirds threshold imposed, 226 and 20 Democrats voted for, and 7 Republicans voted against a bill in May to outlaw abortions based on gender preference. With 431 members of the House, that would mean about 290 of those present and voting. A two-thirds vote would be needed for the bill to carry. The House is one short today. Jeff Davis of Kentucky announcing his retirement effective immediately today.
Two-thirds not being affirmative, the rules are two voting present. Two-thirds not being in the affirmative, the rules are not suspended and the bill is not passed.
Understood.
The House will be in order. For what purposes does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to remove my name as co-sponsor of H.R. 3009. Yield back.
The House will be in order. Objection. Members, please take your conversations off the floor. The House will be in order. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 3796, the Adam Walsh Reauthorization Act of 2012, as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 3796, a bill to reauthorize certain programs established by the Adam Walsh Child Protection and Safety Act of 2006.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Smith, and the gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous materials on H.R. 3796 as amended currently under consideration.
So be ordered. The House will be in order. Will members please take your conversations off the floor for our debate of these suspensions? Recognize the gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the Adam Walsh Child Protection and Safety Act was enacted in 2006 to honor the victims of several violent crimes against children, including Adam Walsh, a 70-year-old boy who was abducted from a store where his mother was shopping in July 1981 and found murdered just 2 weeks later. This important legislation is primarily known for its efforts to create a national sex offender registry. The Sex Offender Registration and Notification Act, or SORNA, created a more uniform system of sex offender registries throughout the country by providing minimum standards that each state must meet. In addition to SORNA, the Adam Walsh Act made the U.S. Marshal Service responsible for the apprehension of both federal and state fugitive sex offenders, as well as for the investigation of sex offender registry violations. The Marshal Service apprehended over 11,000 fugitive sex offenders in 2010 alone. H.R. 3796, the Adam Walsh Reauthorization of 2012, was introduced by Crime Subcommittee Chairman Jim Sensenbrenner, and it reauthorizes the 2 key programs created by the Adam Walsh Act. It provides funding for the U.S. Marshals sex offender apprehension activities and gives grants to states and other jurisdictions to implement the National Sex Offender Registry requirements. These two programs are reauthorized for 5 years at amounts that reflect the fiscal year 2012 appropriation levels. The original Adam Walsh Act contained over 20 different programs and was scored at approximately $1.5 billion over 5 years. By contrast, H.R. 3796 is targeted, fiscally responsible legislation that only reauthorizes the Act's most primary programs at an estimated cost of less than $300 million over the same period. I thank Mr. Sensenbrenner for his leadership on this bill, and I urge my colleagues to join me in support of 3796, and I'll reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Virginia seeks recognition.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise in regard to H.R. 3796, the Adam Walsh reauthorization bill, to claim the time in opposition, though I do not oppose the bill. H.R. 3796 authorizes various grant programs originally established pursuant to the Adam Walsh Child Protection and Safety Act of 2006. While I support reauthorizing these programs, I'm concerned about what is missing from H.R. 3796. Unfortunately, the bill fails to address many problems that the states and Indian tribes have encountered in implementing the Sex Offender Registration and Notification Act, known as SORNA, which is one of the provisions of the original Adam Walsh Act. So far, only 15 states have been found by the Attorney General to be in compliance. Years before SORNA became law, many states had developed their own sex offender registries and dedicated substantial resources and research to develop effective sex offender management systems. To ignore these efforts in favor of SORNA's prescriptive one-size-fits-all system is not only wasteful, but it could adversely affect public safety. I offered 10 amendments in the full committee markup of the bill seeking to provide states and tribes more flexibility to cost-effectively manage sex offenders and to more fully comply with SORNA. Despite the committee's failure to adopt all of these proposed improvements, there are several positive aspects of H.R. 3796 that make changes to the underlying bill which will assist states in this regard. For example, the bill, as amended, ensures that provisions of the Byrne JAG grant funding intended for distribution at the to local governments and entities are not penalized by the state's noncompliance with SORNA. In the absence of this provision, states that have been unable to comply would soon suffer up to 10% reductions of their Byrne JAG grant awards, which is particularly harsh in these difficult economic times. H.R. 3796 at least ensures that the localities that have had no control over whether or not a state complies with SORNA are not penalized. 3 other positive aspects of the bill, as amended, are the following. The bill gives flexibility to put juveniles on law enforcement agency registry only, not on the public registry. That is, juveniles can be only in the law enforcement only registry but not publicized. We'd heard testimony that putting juveniles on a public register would actually be counterproductive, and this bill protects that. The bill authorizes funding under the Adam Walsh Act for treatment of juvenile sex offenders, and the bill requires the public safety impact of long-term or lifetime registration on juvenile registrants to be studied. Finally, H.R. 3796 lowers the age after which certain juveniles adjudicated delinquency with a clean record can apply for removal from the sex offender registry from 15 years down to, from 25 years down to 15 years. This is an improvement over current law, given the research documenting that sex offender treatment reduces recidivism by more than 90% for juveniles, and that long-term public registry adversely affects the rehabilitation that teenage offenders have for the same reason would have, the long-term public registry adversely affects the rehabilitation of teenage offenders, though for the same reasons it would have been best to eliminate the requirement to put juveniles in the registry in the first place. I am pleased, therefore, that H.R. 3796, in reauthorizing the Adam Walsh Act, has improved, at least in these aspects. I regret that it didn't improve some of the things that weren't addressed in the bill, but I think it's important that we pass the bill, and I urge my colleagues to vote in favor of this bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves.
Mr. Speaker, I'll yield such time as he may consume to the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Sensenbrenner, former chairman of the Judiciary Committee and the sponsor of this legislation.
The gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Adam Walsh Child Protection and Safety Act, enacted in 2006, is landmark legislation intended to keep our communities and, most importantly, our children safe from sex offenders and other dangerous predators. This bipartisan bill strengthens sex offender registry requirements and enforcement, extended federal registry requirements to Indian tribes, and authorized funding for several programs intended to address and deter child exploitation. The centerpiece of the Adam Walsh Act is the National Sex Offender Registration and Notification Act, or SORNA. SORNA's goal is to create a seamless national sex offender registry to assist law enforcement's efforts to detect and track offenders. SORNA provides minimum standards for state sex offender registries and created the Drew Shodine National Sex Offender Public website, which allows law enforcement officials and the general public to search for sex offenders nationwide from just one website. H.R. 3796, the Adam Walsh Reauthorization Act of 2012, reauthorizes two key programs from the original Adam Walsh Act: grants to the states and other jurisdictions to implement the Adam Walsh Act sex offender registry requirements, and funding for the U.S. Marshals to locate and apprehend sex offenders who violate registration requirements. These programs are crucial to efforts to complete and enforce the national network of sex offender registries, particularly in light of the already passed July 2011 deadline for the states to come into compliance with SORNA. H.R. 3796 reauthorizes both these programs at levels commensurate with their fiscal year 2012 appropriations. The bill also makes changes to the SORNA sex offender registry requirements in response to feedback from the states. The bill changes the period of time after which juveniles adjudicated delinquent can petition to be removed from the sex offender registry for a clean record from 25 years to 15 years, and provides that juveniles do not need to be included on a publicly viewed sex offender registry. Instead, it is sufficient for juveniles to be included on registries that are only viewed by law enforcement entities. The bill, as amended by the Judiciary Committee, also reauthorizes grant for the treatment of juvenile sex offenders. I believe these provisions strike an appropriate balance between being tough on juveniles who commit serious sex crimes and understanding that there can be differences between adult and juvenile offenders. The Adam Walsh Act has already been a public safety success. To date, the Justice Department has deemed 50 jurisdictions substantially compliant with the SORNA requirements, with 2 Indian tribes meeting this goal in just the 2 weeks since the Judiciary Committee considered H.R. 3796 at markup. I urge my colleagues to support this bill and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back the balance of the time. The gentleman from Virginia.
Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. Recognize the gentleman from Texas.
And, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time as well.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1950 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed? Gentleman from Texas. The chair will put the question again. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 3796 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
Mr. Speaker, I object to the vote on the grounds that a quorum is not present and make a point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20 and the Chair's prior announcement, further proceedings on this motion will be postponed. For what purposes does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1950 to enact Title 54 United States Code National Park System as positive law as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 1950, a bill to enact Title 54 United States Code National Park System as positive law.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Smith, and the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Scott, each will control 20 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous materials on H.R. 1950 as amended currently under consideration.
Seeing no objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the rules of the House entrust to the Judiciary Committee the responsibilities of revision and codification of the statutes of the United States. This power does not give our committee substantive legislative jurisdiction over all areas of law. It merely confers the authority to organize duly enacted laws into an efficient codification system. The nonpartisan Office of Law Revision Counsel is responsible for properly codifying public laws into titles and sections of the United States Code. From time to time, that office provides the Judiciary Committee advice as to how to enact a more user-friendly and cohesive statutory system. This spring, Republican and Democratic committee staff worked cooperatively with the Office of Law Revision Counsel to develop H.R. 1950. The bill creates a new title of positive law, Title 54, to compile all of the laws that relate to the national park system. Codification bills do not make any substantive changes to existing law. Before the Judiciary Committee marked up H.R. 1950, industries, government, and interested parties commented on the draft. Based on their comments, I offered a manager's amendment in committee to further ensure that this bill makes no changes to substantive law. I encourage my colleagues to support this bill, and I'll reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 1950. Dating back to the mid-19th century, numerous laws have been enacted pertaining to the organization and management of the National Park System by the National Park Service. The system is also responsible for carrying out Historic Sites, Building and Antiquities Act, the National Historic Preservation Act, and other laws relating to the protection and preservation of sites that illustrate America's history. Over the ensuing years, laws specifying the service's responsibilities have been codified in various sections of Title 16 of the United States Code, and as laws relating to the National Park Service were amended, new laws were added to the code, and classifications have become more cumbersome to use. H.R. 1950 simply gathers all of these provisions pertaining to the National Park Service and restates them in a new positive law title of the United States Code. The new Title 54 of the Code replaces and repeals these provisions of the former law. All changes in existing law made by H.R. 1950 are purely technical, and they reflect the understood policy, intent, and purpose of Congress in the original enactments. These changes include corrections to remove ambiguities, contradictions, and other imperfections. We should note that this measure was drafted by the Office of the Law Revision Counsel as part of that office's ongoing statutory responsibility to prepare a complete compilation, restatement, and revision of the general and pertinent laws of the United States. I commend the Office of Law Revision Counsel for its good work on H.R. 1950 and for its many valuable contributions to our legislative process. Mr. Speaker, accordingly, I urge my colleagues to support the measure and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back.
Mr. Speaker, I'll yield back the balance of my time as well.
The gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1950 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is agreed to, and without objection, the motion to reconsider. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I object to the vote on the grounds that a quorum is not present and make a point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20 and the Chair's prior announcement, further proceedings on this motion will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 3120, the Student Visa Reform Act, as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 430, H.R. 3120, a bill to amend the Immigration and Nationality Act to require accreditation of certain educational institutions for purposes of non-immigrant student visa and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Smith, and the gentlewoman from California, each will control 20 minutes. Recognize the gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous materials on H.R. 3120 as amended, currently under consideration.
Without objection, is so ordered. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'd first like to thank the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Lofgren, for introducing this legislation. H.R. 3120 helps prevent student visa fraud by requiring that any college or university that admits foreign students on F visas must be accredited by an accrediting body recognized by the Department of Education. Accreditation of academic institutions ensures that foreign students in the United States on temporary visas receive the high-level education they deserve and expect, as opposed to an education from a sham school only interested in the student's money. Under the Immigration and Nationality Act, a foreign national can get a student visa to study at a U.S. college or university. Those schools must be officially recognized, but that sometimes means that there is just a windshield check to see that the building actually exists. Foreign students were admitted to the U.S. 1.5 million times on F visas during fiscal year 2010. We must ensure that the colleges or universities they attend are not simply visa mills that exist only to provide the students with a way to enter the United States. Examples of rampant student visa fraud can be found in many recent news reports. H.R. 3120 helps ensure a school's legitimacy for foreign students who want to come to the United States in order to receive an education. It also helps ensure the integrity of our immigration system by reducing the opportunities for visa fraud. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 3120, and I'll reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
Thank you. I yield myself such time as I may consume. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of this bill, the Student Visa Reform Act. Our U.S. student visa program has a long and proud history. For decades, it's helped American colleges and universities attract some of the brightest young minds in the world while offering those students the opportunity to study in the world's leading institutions of higher education. The benefits to our country have been great. International students have expanded and enriched the educational experiences for all students at U.S. universities and colleges. And by immersing foreign students in American culture, the program often creates a lasting and favorable understanding of our country that pays dividends in foreign nations for years to come. Unfortunately, some institutions have been undermining the laudable mission of this visa program. Last year, the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement took down 2 schools in California after they were found to have engaged in widespread visa fraud and exploitation of students. Among other things, these schools misled students as to their accreditation, and they lied about the ability of students to transfer credits to other institutions. Commonly known as visa mills, these schools took enormous sums of money from the students but provided questionable academic courses and essentially worthless degrees. To prevent this type of fraud in the future, H.R. 3120 requires that colleges and universities be accredited in order to host foreign students. Such accreditation would need to be given by a regional or national accrediting agency recognized by the Secretary of Education. Seminaries and other religious institutions would be exempt from this requirement. This bill follows in the footsteps of legislation enacted in the 111th Congress that requires the accreditation of language training programs before they can host foreign students. That bill, sponsored by my good friend Representative Barney Frank and the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Congressman Lamar Smith, has already helped the Department of Homeland Security crack down on fraud in language training programs. Like the Frank-Smith bill, the accreditation requirements instituted by this bill will prevent illegitimate institutions from cheating foreign students who legitimately seek a bona fide education in the United States. In addition, this requirement will prevent fly-by-night institutions from engaging in student visa fraud to smuggle or traffic persons into the country. Finally, in committee, I worked with the chairman to add a provision that would prevent persons who have committed certain crimes from owning or running an academic institution that seeks to host foreign students. Persons would be barred if they have been convicted of human trafficking, transportation for illegal sexual activity, alien smuggling or harboring, or visa fraud under the student visa program. We also added a provision to give the Secretary of Homeland Security additional flexibility with respect to schools that are playing by the rules and trying to get accreditation but may be running into bureaucratic delays. Specifically, the Secretary is given the ability to waive the accreditation requirements in cases where an educational institution is otherwise in compliance with the law and is taking good faith steps to obtain accreditation. I thank Chairman Smith for working with me to bring this bill to the floor and for working with me to improve the strength and strengthen the bill in committee. I urge my colleagues to support the bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman yields back the balance of her time. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I'll yield back the balance of my time as well.
The gentleman yields back, and the question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 3120 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative.
Mr. Speaker, I object on the grounds that a quorum is not present. Make a point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20 and the chair's prior announcement, further proceedings on this motion will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 6029, the Foreign and Economic Espionage Penalty Enhancement Act of 2012.
Clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 443, H.R. 6029, a bill to amend Title 18 United States Code to provide for increased penalties for foreign and economic espionage and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Smith, and the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Scott, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous materials on H.R. 6029 currently under consideration.
Without objection, the chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
And, Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The chair recognizes the gentleman.
Mr. Speaker, I thank Ranking Member John Conyers, IP Subcommittee Chairman Bob Goodlatte, IP Subcommittee Ranking Member Mel Watt, and the other members of the House from both sides of the aisle who joined as original co-sponsors of this common-sense bill. The Foreign and Economic Espionage Penalty Enhancement Act of 2012 focuses on one goal: to deter and punish criminals who target U.S. economic and security interests on behalf of foreign interests. In 1975, tangible assets such as real estate and equipment made up 83% of the market value of S&P 500 companies. Intangible assets, which include trade secrets, proprietary data, source code, business processes, and marketing plans, constituted only 17% of these companies' market value. By 2009, these percentages had nearly reversed. Tangible assets accounted for only 19% of S&P 500 companies' market value, while their intangible assets had soared to 81%. In a dynamic and globally connected information economy, the protection of intangible assets is vital not only to the success of individual enterprises, but also to the future of entire industries. A global study released last year by McAfee, the world's largest security technology company, and Science Applications International Corporation, concluded that corporate trade secrets and other sensitive intellectual capital are the newest currency of cyber criminals. The study found the motivation for such crimes in the cyber underground is almost always financial. In recent years, cyber criminals have shifted from targeting the theft of personal information, such as credit cards and Social Security numbers, to the theft of corporate intellectual capital. Corporate intellectual capital is vulnerable, of great value to competitors and foreign governments, and its theft is not always discovered by victims. Our intelligence community warns that foreign interests place a high priority on acquiring sensitive U.S. economic information and technologies. Targets include information and communication technologies, business information, military technologies, and rapidly growing civilian and dual-use technologies such as those that relate to clean energy, health care, and pharmaceuticals. We know that certain actors intentionally seek out U.S. information and trade secrets. The most recent report from the Office of the National Counterintelligence Executive identified Chinese actors as the world's most active and persistent perpetrators of economic espionage. The report also described Russia's intelligence services as responsible for conducting a range of activities to collect economic information and technology from U.S. targets. Of 7 Economic Espionage Act cases resolved in fiscal year 2010, 6 involved links to China. 5 companies were accused of the theft of trade secrets earlier this year. 4 are Chinese state-owned enterprises or subsidiaries. In the U.S., EEA serves as the primary tool the federal government uses to protect secret, valuable commercial information from theft. The EEA addresses 2 types of trade secret theft. Section 1831 punishes the theft of a trade secret to benefit a foreign entity. Section 1832 punishes the commercial theft of trade secrets carried out for economic advantage, whether or not the theft benefits a foreign entity. Since enacting the EEA in 1996, Congress has not adjusted its penalties to take into account the increasing importance of intellectual property to the economic and national security of the U.S. The bill increases the maximum penalties for an individual convicted of committing espionage on behalf of a foreign entity. Currently, the maximum penalty for someone convicted under Section 1831 of the EEA is 15 years imprisonment and a fine of up to $500,000. This bill increases the maximum penalty to 20 years imprisonment and a fine up to $5 million. Earlier this year, the FBI estimated that U.S. companies had lost $13 billion to trade secret theft in just over 6 months. Over the past 6 years, losses to individual U.S. companies have ranged from $20 million to as much as $1 billion. Our intelligence community has recognized a significant and growing threat to our nation's prosperity and security posed by criminals, both inside and outside our borders, who commit espionage. Congress should also recognize this increasing threat and enhance deterrence and more aggressively punish those criminals who knowingly target U.S. companies for espionage. So I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 6029, which was unanimously reported by the Judiciary Committee this month. And I'll reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 6029, the Foreign and Economic Espionage Penalty Enhancement Act of 2012. This legislation will help to protect the intellectual property and competitive strengths of American businesses by increasing the maximum penalties for engaging in the federal offense of economic espionage. This crime, which has serious repercussions for the victim companies and our economy, consists of knowingly misappropriating trade secrets with the intent or knowledge that the offense will benefit a foreign government. As reported by the U.S. Intellectual Property Enforcement Coordinator, economic espionage is a serious threat to American businesses by foreign governments. Economic espionage inflicts a significant cost on victim companies and threatens the economic security of the United States. These companies incur extensive costs resulting from the loss of unique intellectual property, the loss of expenditures related to research and development, and the loss of future revenues and profits. These many companies do not even know that their sensitive data has been stolen, and those that do find out are often reluctant to report the loss, fearing potential damage to their reputation with investors, customers, and employees. Unfortunately, the pace of economic espionage collection of information and industrial espionage activities against major United States corporations is accelerating. During fiscal year 2011, the Department of Justice and the FBI saw an increase of 29% in the economic espionage and trade secret theft investigations compared to the prior year. Foreign competitors of United States corporations with ties to companies owned by foreign governments are increasing their efforts to steal trade secret information and intellectual property by infiltrating our computer networks. Evidence suggests that economic espionage and trade secret theft on behalf of companies located in China is an emerging trend. For example, at least 34 companies were reportedly victimized by attacks originating from China in 2010. Over the course of these attacks, computer viruses were spread via emails to corporate employees, allowing the attackers to have access to emails and sensitive documents. In response to these growing threats, the United States Intellectual Property Coordinator, in her 2011 annual report, called upon Congress to increase the penalties for economic espionage, and this bill is consistent with that recommendation. I want to commend members of both sides of the aisle for their work on this bill, particularly the gentleman from Texas, the Judiciary Committee Chairman, Mr. Smith, the gentleman from Michigan, the ranking member of the committee, Mr. Conyers, my colleague from Virginia, Mr. Goodlatte, and the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Watt. And I urge my colleagues to support the bill and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time as well.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 6029? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, two-thirds being in an affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is agreed to.
Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from Virginia.
Mr. Speaker, I object to the vote on the grounds that a quorum is not present and make a point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20 and the Chair's prior announcement, further proceedings on this motion will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 6063, the Child Protection Act of 2012.
Clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 459, H.R. 6063, a bill to amend Title 18 United States Code with respect to child pornography and child exploitation offenses.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Smith, and the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Scott, each will control 20 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous materials on H.R. 6063 currently under consideration.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, Internet child pornography may be the fastest growing crime in America, increasing an average of 150% per year. Every day, online criminals prey on America's children with virtual anonymity. And according to recent estimates, there are as many as 100,000 fugitive sex offenders in the U.S. Congress has taken important steps to combat child exploitation, including passage of the Adam Walsh Act in 2006 and the Protect Our Children Act in 2008. But our work is not yet done. That is why Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz and I introduced H.R. 6063, the Child Protection Act of 2012. It provides law enforcement officials with important tools and additional resources to combat the growing threat of child pornography and exploitation. This bipartisan legislation increases penalties for child pornography offenses that involve young children and strengthens protections for child witnesses and victims. The bill allows a federal court to issue a protective order if it determines that a child victim or witness is being harassed or intimidated and imposes criminal penalties for violation of that protective order. The Child Protection Act ensures that paperwork does not stand in the way of the apprehension of dangerous criminals. This bill gives the U.S. Marshals limited subpoena authority to locate and apprehend fugitive sex offenders. Unlike the other 300 federal administrative subpoena powers, which are used at the beginning of a criminal investigation, the Marshals' use of subpoena authority under this bill will occur only after, and only after these actions occur. The fugitive is arrested pursuant to a judge-issued warrant, indicted for committing a sex offense, convicted by proof beyond a reasonable doubt, and sentenced in a law of court. The fugitive is required to register as a sex offender. The fugitive flees or otherwise violates their registration requirements, and a state or federal arrest warrant is issued for violation of the registration requirements. This narrow subpoena authority is critical to help take convicted sex offenders off the streets. H.R. 6063 also reauthorizes for 5 years the Internet Crimes Against Children task forces. The ICAC task forces were launched in 1998 and officially authorized by Congress in the Protect Our Children Act of 2008. The ICAC Task Force program is a national network of 61 coordinated task forces that represent over 3,000 federal, state, and local law enforcement and prosecutorial agencies dedicated to child exploitation investigations. Since 1998, the ICAC task forces have reviewed more than 280,000 complaints of alleged child sexual abuse and have arrested more than 30,000 individuals. The Child Protection Act increases the cap on grant funds for ICAC training programs and makes several clarifications to provisions enacted as a part of the Protect Our Children Act. Finally, the bill requests a report from the Justice Department on implementation of the National Internet Crimes Against Children data system. Yesterday, Senators Blumenthal and Cornyn introduced the companion bill in the Senate. This bipartisan, bicameral bill is supported by a number of outside organizations, which include the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, the major city chiefs of police, Futures Without Violence, the Fraternal Order of Police, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, the National Alliance to End Sexual Violence, the National District Attorneys Association, the National White Collar Crime Center, the National Sheriff's Association, the Surviving Parents Coalition, the Rape Abuse Incest National Network, National Alliance to End Sexual Violence, and the National Association to Protect Children. And once again, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz for her great work on this issue. And I urge my colleagues to join me in support of this important legislation to protect America's children. And I'll reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Virginia.
Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Without objection.